Let's start with, let's just say, for example, we go to the nearby electronics store and we look at all the TVs on the wall. You ever gone TV shopping and you look on the wall and you always migrate to the one that looks what? More colorful, more bright, more contrasty. You're always looking for the one that has more pop. And the thing about that is that of course that looks more attractive, and they've actually taken that strategy and put it into your camera. So when you go to the camera store and you're taking pictures, maybe comparing a Nikon or a Canon or a Pentax or whatever, and you look at the difference, you're gonna, statistics would show, pick the one that has the more color, saturation, the more pop, the more contrast, the more impact. And that's not necessarily good, and I'll tell you why. Because when you're a professional photographer, you don't want a lot of contrast, you don't want a lot of saturation. For example, here, I've got this image on the right, and I don't know how it looks like on the screen, but on mine it just looks, the one on the right is a lot more colorful and a lot more contrasty. Now if you were to look at these up on the wall, if it was a television store or something like that, you'd probably pick the one on the right. You'd go, wow, that one's just got a lot more pop, it's got a lot more punch. And so therefore, you think that that's actually the nicer looking camera. It'll give more colorful images. But the problem is when you're a professional photographer, contrast and saturation are the enemy. They actually go against you if you're, say, for example, a wedding photographer or a portrait photographer, because what happens is when you augment these settings, you get colors that are a little bit more cartoonish and a lot less accurate. The other problem with having high contrast is, you can see right here, I'm starting to blow out the forehead and, you know, kind of making them really white. And when you do that, you start to get blown out images, and that's not repairable. Here's a key rule in editing your images. You can always increase contrast, you can always increase saturation, but you cannot go backwards once you have it too much. And so the actual trick would be, start off with low contrast, low saturation, then if you need a shot that has a little bit more image or more punch, you can go ahead and do that later in your image editing software. And let me show you what happens when I increase the color saturation. So we'll go to adjust. Now watch this. See right here where it says saturation? I'd like you to look at these two squares right here, the kind of pinkish and the reddish. When I increase the saturation, watch what happens between the two. You see how they become almost identical? Now you really can't tell the difference between these two. And the reason that that's a problem, you have a smaller number of colors. In fact, your reds have all become the similar red. So if you have, like, say for example, somebody standing in front of a fire truck, but their shirt is a little bit of a faded red, the fire truck and the shirt will become screaming red if you increase the color saturation. What I'm saying is it's like coloring with 64 crayons, and if you increase the saturation, you go down to 8 crayons. So your blues will all become the similar blue, the reds will all become the similar red, and the problem with that is that will make your images a lot less realistic and a lot less natural looking. So you've got two opposing forces. You've got your cameras that are set for high contrast, high saturation, because when you're at the camera store, they want you to buy the camera. They want you to go, oh wow, that looks really cool, so I'm going to get the one that has the best looking LED. But again, that's not the best for professional results. So when you buy a camera, the first thing that I do as a professional is I go straight to the picture style in Canon, or I forgot what it's called in Nikon, but they all have this type of window where you can change the contrast, the sharpness, and the saturation. And this is a Canon example right here. And you'll see that these numbers here are 2000, 2 being the sharpness. What I like to do, because again, we can always increase anything later. It's just the rule I'm trying to say, but you can't decrease. I would rather these all be 0, 0, 0, 0. The reason that is because when I'm shooting, I'll be able to go and have the most consistent results with the softest, most accurate colors for the most professional look. So the first thing that I do when people say, Gary, I'm having a problem with my camera, I don't know why it messes up. My iPhone takes better pictures than my professional digital SLR, and I don't understand it. I'll grab the person's camera and then I'll say, well, you know, here's your problem. And the problems and I'll go through the problems with settings, and then I'll go through the situation with the quality of light. So rule number one, when you buy your camera, you will get much better, much more pleasing results if you take your camera and set your picture style to neutral. That means 0, 0, 0, 0 all the way across. Did you know when you buy your camera, typically the contrast, saturation are augmented, which means that the camera store, not the camera store, but the people at Canon and Nikon or Sony will increase the saturation or the contrast to make it look better at the store. Taking it down to 0 will give you professional results, and I promise you, you'll get much less errors in your digital SLR by doing that subtle technique. And again, your images will look accurate like that image on the left, not cartoon-like like the image on the right. I like to say when you have too much contrast and too much saturation, it looks like a color Xerox. That's exactly what you get when you do a color copy of a actual photograph. The contrast and the saturation becomes much, much higher.